stabilized. The structure is.
Yeah, yours got more stable, that's for sure.
Okay. So let me.
I just uploaded my too.
So, did everybody upload their work
Yes.
Where did you want to upload it?
to the Google Drive that I sent you?
The keynote, it has videos in it, and I don't think place want to export it as a PDF. Can I just drop the
Drop the
keynote?
videos in there. Drop the, put the video, yeah, put the keynote in there with the videos in it.
Okay.
Yeah, or give me the video separate.
Okay.
Okay.
Cause I do show a motion when I present the stuff. Like we do this every term to first termers that are coming in.
Oh.
Give them a taste of what.
What does this sound traumatizing?
Scared them now.
You could do.
Yeah, look what you could do. Look what you have to do.
When you have to start.
Go back home.
Okay.
Okay, let's do 28 hours.
Are you good to start?
Yes.
Okay. So hi everyone. My name is Michelle, and today I'll take you on a tour and an experience through my book called Beyond the Scent. So the backstory to this, let me see if I can switch. Okay. So I've been getting a lot of comments based on my scent choices for the past term, and it got a really interesting, including that we can pick any topic to do in this class. So these were the statements that made me think if I should do something based on what I've interacted with people, what they've been saying, and always the question that they ask is, what perfume are you wearing? So I'm throwing it back to you guys, and you don't have to answer this, but I would like to ask, what perfume are you wearing right now? And if you know the answers, I also want to know, do you like it because of the brand, or do you like it because of the smell? And why the question is, and going deeper to that is do you really know your perfume? So let's start with the history of perfume. And this is where we start the research. So with all the perfumes that we know today, with all of the categories that they've dealt within the industry, I went deeper into learning on why people create certain scents and why people create different profiles. They even make category of why certain people like sweet scents. And I come to notice that wrapping all of the research, learning about different scents have different audiences. The world of perfumes are not so different with the psychology, and this is where the bridge between the perfumes that you wear and the effects on psychology stands. And this was the decision I wanted to do through my book, where I take, the world of perfume and the understanding of psychology and then mix it all up in this one book. So it states that the world of perfume is no different than psychology and its different traits affecting the society we live in as well, in hopes that this book will help people understand why they choose certain things, why it suits them, and suggestively talking about the reason beyond certain notes that are created. So what you're seeing right now is one of the first thing that I found doing this research is tapuri. It's an engraved recipe on the left side. And also it's one of the scent formulas that was made by a female perfumer. And fun fact is that Tapuri was the first female perfumer that made perfume in Akkadian on a clay tablet that you see. And now this methodology is also used in one of a brand called Santa Novella. And they have one of the branches here in Irvine. And the way they showcase the perfumes is through this ceramic bell shape, and they infuse the scents inside. So the way you do your tester is you have to pick it up and sort of ringing it, but not really. It's just moving it around and smelling it. And second part of the research that I realized, this also has a connection to the Islamic part of the world. And so perfume originally derives from the Latin word per perfume, meaning through smoke, reflecting its origins in burning aromatic substances. So it travels along the area of Mesopotamia, and then it evolves around ancient Egypt. And the picture you're seeing right now, his name is Avicenna. So he is renowned of producing frankincense and myrrh, if I'm not mistaken on how to pronounce this. So during the era that he's learning how to distill, so between perfumeries and distillery, both have different categories, and they both have different art worlds within. So with Avicenna, he created, and I mentioned frankincense and myrrh, and he also established what scent is categorized as like high end sort of back then, and also like what scent is accessible. And back then, scents also determines your social status. So it's interesting to know how that comes to play now within like the perfume industry. So going off the research, how do we tell the story? So I plan out the sequence where we start from the historical part of the book to the modern context to the different layers of perfume that we know, and trying to learn deep down like why we picked what we picked, and also why certain scents are now very, limited. And so there are 7 sequences to the book, so there's a lot of chapters that are combined, but mainly this is the wireframe that we started off for the book. After deciding what to tell first and what to tell after, I went in to do more mind mapping to see how far I can extend the idea of, talking about perfumes and like what does psychology have to do with it. And these were the insights that I found from the psychological aspect of it, that the fragrance that we choose affects our psychophysiological activity, so it affects our mood, stress, and our work capacity. So when you're in a room like this and you smell someone that you don't like, that also sometimes affects the way you work. So scent plays a huge role. And it's also one of the things that I realized Rockefeller University in New York did. They did research that 1 to 2% of people will remember other people based on their scent. So some people have what we call a visual memory. Based on this research, I learned people have a smell memory, like a scent memory. So it's like when you smell a baby and you like it, that's what we call like a scent memory. So going through all of these research paper, I come to realize that my 2 main focuses in the book is psychology and perfumery. And I noticed that I do have to have a keyword. The way that I work with books is I decided to do romantic, apothecary, and personal. And the next thing to think about is how will we produce the book? So my dimensions of my book is 6.25 inch by 8.63 inch. The reason why I picked this size was that I was holding a magazine that I really liked, and it was really nice to carry around. I tested out and I decided to do that size. Going with how we're gonna bind the book, I decided to do a Swiss bind book with an actual finished text paper. And thanks to Typecraft, we eventually did it. And for the cover, it's a Swiss bind, also with a book cloth red dupletta cover with a full stamp on the front and back. So the color palette for this derives from the traditional colors that we just saw from the research part, where most Arabic perfumists would have like really rich red, and all the other colors are deriving from natural colors of the ingredients. Going into more technical details about the book, we have a typeface that I use mainly for the body copy and tertiary text, and that is the Warnock Pro by Adobe Fonts. But I also came up with a system where I decided to use my own handwriting for most of the headliners. The reason why I decided to use a handwriting technique for this is because most perfumeries back then are handcrafted. So I wanted to convey that feeling by doing a handwriting to this. After knowing what font to use and then what other techniques we're going to use, how will we name the book? So there was a couple of stages that we decided to talk about the name, and I noticed that I keep using the idea of like beyond the bottle, but we're not just talking about the bottle, we're talking about how it came about, the inside of it. So I later talked to Tracy, we discussed, and we came out with an idea called Beyond the Scent. So that was the final name for it. So here is where the design stage starts. And mind you, I am an ex-corporate identity fanatic, and this is where my downfall starts. So this was stage 1, seeing how I wanted to feel for the book. Stage 2 was where I did most of my color iteration to see which color was working. But I do realize I have the tendency to structure everything and not letting it breathe. And stage 3 is where I started to incorporate more of the organic feel to the whole craftsmanship and the other traditional, also old school photography for perfumes. Stage 4 is where I start to play around with more contents, because I do have a lot to put in to translate into an artistic book. And more extension of that is where I put more of the psychological content. Going into stage 5, nearing the end of this design stage, is where I started to realize that I do have to let go of certain things that I tend to do and let that part of the stage really test me out. And I did have a mental breakdown in this point because I didn't know if I was doing it right, but it's not a matter of that. It's more a matter of like, how would you feel as a reader to understand these topics page by page? So learning
But
to
you can still feel that corporate
Yeah.
part of you is still laying
Yeah.
on. It's like,
I want to stay safe.
Yeah.
Stay safe.
Yeah, I feel like this is like my second book that I did with Tracy, so I know there's a long way to go for me. But I can definitely say the first half of the book already feels like it's not my regular corporate self. And this is stage 5 where I extend it, and now here is the final version. Where as you can see, this does not feel like the other stages. And this would be the other component of the book where we talk more about the base notes, top notes, and middle notes. When you wear perfume, it's not just one sprit and that's the smell. It actually has layers like a cake. So the first thing you smell isn't the first thing that's going to stay, it's going to be the first thing that goes. So that's the idea of perfumery. So within this book, also I added a interview that I was fortunate enough to do with a perfumist. And thanks to Tracy, I got to invite her to be part of this book too. So going in from that and incorporating a lot of imagery that I'm glad that I got to do more analog. Also transitioning to the idea that this will affect the book cover that I have in mind for this book. So a couple of the versions that I did was only thinking about the bottle, which is not the main point of the book, but going to the second stage where I had a graphic element, which I'm going to talk soon, decided to be the main star of the show, and I feel like it's interesting enough to learn, and I'll explain why the shape is the shape like this. So I'll take you guys back to like how I make my images. So I wanted to have more of an original taste to this, and so I had a scanner that was lying at home, and I know I had this idea of vision that I cannot do through like building acrylics. So I was experimenting to my scanner to see how far I can push it. So I was using color gels, I was letting the lid open, and I was seeing how most images would look, and it gave me this look where you would do with like professional photographies. And with a little bit of tweak here and there, one of them actually made it through as a poster. So from that experimentation, I knew I had to push myself further for, displaying the idea of this. So this is where it gets interesting. So the graphic language that you guys see on the book, and this is because I love corporate identity so much that I decided to do this as part of it. So what you're looking at right now is a particle of when you spray your perfumes, and it's actually measured by the gallons per acre. So this is not exactly the same shape you would see when you spray your perfume on you, but in general, what you're seeing in the center is like what a spray would look like at 12 gallons per acre as a fine spray. And then on the other, the right part is like when you have it on 4 gallons per acre. So the bigger the number, actually the finer the circles are, but the smaller the number, the bigger the circles are. So the first one would be the biggest one. And so with that, I explore with the color system that I have to be flexible enough to be part of the book as a clear distinction of when a chapter starts or when a chapter ends. So with that color system, I noticed that I have other components that could be conveyed within the graphic language that I had. And within the colors that you guys see right now, it's actually representing a feeling presented by each scent profile. So I worked with ChatGPT to actually color analyze everything to see what colors represent what feelings. And this is all driven by psychology, so none of the colors are like randomly picked. They're all intentionally used. So with the same graphic language, on one part of the book where it talks about the scent menu, I decided to work with my imagery and the graphic language to be, looking seamlessly together as like a scientific part of the book. So every ingredient is represented with this graphic language to represent the origins, even interesting. So this is where I will highlight the parts of my book, is that I got to do a interview with Alexandra Balahuris. So she's the owner of Strange Invisible Perfumes in Venice. So her perfumes are more naturally based, while as the perfumes that you see with brands can be considered as synthetic. So when a scent is really strong, you can tell it's more real than a scent that's like softly lands on your skin. So there's two types of perfume. There's naturally derived and there's also synthetic. But for price purposes, a lot of people use synthetic, which is still okay, but going back to everyone's preference. So the other part of the book that I talked about with the graphic language and the images was the scent menu. So in this part of the book, you can learn what scent that you like and what mostly ingredients that they use in. And sometimes they can control which part you want to smell first and which scent would last or be the last one that you smell. So the other interesting part on the book overall is the handwriting progress. I noticed that I used a lot of styles for this, and out of Tracy's comment and everyone else, I try to make it consistent. And because back in Indonesia we had to learn how to do these types of handwriting, I forgot what it's called, but cursive handwriting for about 6 years. So I wanted to bring that part, and then there's also mimicking the old vintage apothecary labels people usually get, and introducing the book in its actual form and finished product is seeing it after picking it up, which was really interesting. And wasn't the actual outcome that I expected, but it actually went beyond. And I always love to incorporate natural lighting to my book photographies and other projects in general. So we have the details of the book, and with the images that I didn't want to put effects because I know I'll also rely on the paper that I'll be printing on, which David helped me out on that. So one of the spreads you see right now really makes it even interesting with the noise. And so this would be the directory page or the table of contents you see. This is the Swiss bind, but we decided to take the cover off, so it's using naked spine. And this is one of the pull quotes on the page that you guys see later on. And we have the page where it introduces the interview that I did with Alexandra. And then this is the page where we're learning about the love code. So the AIM code, the AIM in French means love, so the love code. And this is one of the imageries that I did with my scanner. I'm really sorry about the transition. I did not know this was happening. Also, this was also a part where I learned how to talk with people who have such a big influential like Alexandra and what images to use. Like when you're mentioning someone that has that big of an impact on the industry, it's good to ask them like what images to include. And this was the image that they let me use. And these are the other spreads that I ended up including for the photography. More details on like how it was done. I do realize after doing all of this process that quality control is important. So more photographies of how the book would be presented. Because it has flowery notes, this would work with the floral around it. And this was a mock-up that I wanted to use because I didn't have enough time to make the case. So the original idea was to have a book in a slipcase. So it would either have the same color or it would have a more clear color.
It's good for